The strange but true story featured on this podcast contains details some people may find unsettling. Listener discretion is advised. I'm Chaya Samuel, and things are about to get weird. Welcome everyone, thank you for clicking on this brand new episode of Things Are About to Get Weird. This is the podcast where I discuss strange but true stories of all kinds, from bizarre true crimes to unexplained paranormal happenings, plus topics like the one I have for you today. The strange phenomenon of déjà vu has fascinated me since I can remember, and after all of the amazing feedback I had about our episodes which looked at things like sleep paralysis and Lazarus syndrome, I thought it would be quite compelling to do a deep dive into déjà vu next. Before we start, I give this same disclaimer whenever I'm talking about any topic of this sort. So, just to make it clear, I am not a doctor, a psychologist, or a medical professional of any kind. The information I'm going to be presenting today is not medical advice. It's simply based on what I've learned through the course of my research, and all of my sources will be cited at the end as usual. If you're concerned about anything raised in today's episode in relation to your health, please do speak to your doctor. All of that said, let's get the episode started. Let's begin by taking it right back to basics. What does the term déjà vu actually refer to? Well, it's a way to describe that uncanny sensation that you've experienced something before. More specifically, that you've already lived through the moment you're currently in, but it's often accompanied by the feeling that something's not quite right with that recollection. Dr. Akira O'Connor, who is a senior psychology lecturer at the University of St. Andrews, explained this very eloquently when he said, quote, "Déjà vu is basically a conflict between the sensation of familiarity and the awareness that the familiarity is incorrect. It's the awareness that you're being tricked that makes déjà vu so unique compared to other memory events. Most healthy people don't tend to believe the sensation of familiarity and change their behavior. Like Neo in The Matrix, they logically know something isn't right." Such a great analogy, and we'll talk more about The Matrix later. Neurologist Dr. Jean Curry also gave a great summary of the feeling, saying, "Déjà vu is a false sense of familiarity. Your brain creates a sensation as if you have lived a certain situation before, but you're unable to retrieve it from your memory and cannot identify the actual situation." So, given this description of the phenomenon, it's no surprise that the term déjà vu is French for already seen. And just in case there's anyone listening that has never experienced it, here's a random example of how it could feel. Imagine that you're at a sushi restaurant with 3 work colleagues and one of them brings up a certain topic, say the band Green Day, and just for a second you suddenly have this wave of feeling like you've been in that exact place, having the exact same conversation before, even though you know you haven't. It's that sense that we've already gone through a particular moment or encounter before, because for a fleeting moment it feels intensely familiar, almost as though our subconscious is trying to tell us something. It can feel quite disconcerting for a short time at least. And whilst there will be some people out there who have never encountered déjà vu, experts believe that it is very common, and that around 2/3 of people will experience it at least once during their lifetime. This figure feels a bit low to me. I'm sure it's got to be more than that, but that's the most commonly cited statistic I can find. That said though, it's something that's incredibly difficult for scientists to study because it occurs so randomly. And if you've ever had a moment of déjà vu, you'll know that part of what makes it feel so strange is that it just comes over you very quickly and can disappear again as fast as it arrived. And here we arrive at the big question. Why does déjà vu happen? What causes it, and what are the most widely accepted explanations for this this phenomenon. As with most conditions that have this air of mystery around them, there are several theories surrounding déjà vu, although there's not yet one definitive answer. Most of the theories are based in science, while some of them are a little more off the wall, even otherworldly. Today, I'm going to begin with just some of the main ideas that have been put forward by scientists and psychologists. There are many, but I'm going to stick to some of the key ones today. Then I've got a couple of extreme examples to tell you about, and we'll finish off by looking at the more alternative theories. So, one of the first terms you're likely to come across when looking into déjà vu is the temporal lobe. I've read these words more times than I can count over the past few days, and that's because many scientists believe that this pair of areas of the brain, the place where memories are stored, could have a connection to this phenomenon. Essentially, it's been suggested that déjà vu happens when this area of the brain tries to correct an inaccurate memory. Here's what Dr. O'Connor says may happen when the temporal lobe fires off signals that you've lived through a current experience before. He explains this so well, quote, "After this, the frontal decision-making areas of the brain effectively checks to see whether or not this signal is consistent with what is possible. It will ask, have I been here before? If you have actually been in that place before, you may try harder to retrieve more memories. If not, a déjà vu realization can occur." And weirdly, I experienced this exact back and forth in my own brain not so long ago. On my recent trip to the US, which I know I've talked about a lot lately, but I promise this is relevant, we spent a few nights near Yosemite National Park. When we walked into the hotel we were staying at, I suddenly had this overwhelming feeling that I'd been there before. It felt so familiar, and the more I walked around, tiny details would trigger this sensation over and over again, and I considered that it could just be déjà vu. But when I still felt the same the next day, I decided that it couldn't be déjà vu because my brain was still trying to search back in my memory bank to figure out why this hotel was so recognizable to me. It bugged me so much that I had to send a message to my mum asking whether she recognized the hotel name. And as it turns out, my family and I had stayed there for a single night back when I was 16 years old. And I kept saying, I knew it, because even though I tried to convince myself it was just déjà vu, I must have subconsciously known it wasn't and that I really had been there before. Now, many experts believe that it's perfectly normal for most people to experience déjà vu from time to time, say a couple of times per year, because it could be a sign that our brains are fact-checking correctly, if you like, making sure that something isn't being remembered incorrectly. Our brains and our memories are incredibly complex after all, so perhaps it's not surprising that a few wires get crossed occasionally. There is a school of thought that in some specific cases, déjà vu could be a symptom of temporal lobe epilepsy, as it's been noted that some people with the condition get the feeling of déjà vu before a seizure. But as I'm not a medical professional, I don't want to get into this side of things today, as it's just so far out of the remit of my understanding. If this was something that anyone was concerned about, it would be a matter to discuss further with a doctor. So let's get back to some of the other scientific theories surrounding déjà vu. One that I found very intriguing was the idea of split perception, or inattentiveness, being the cause. If we see something but we're in a distracted state, or we see it out of the corner of our eye, for example, our brains still register the thing on some level but don't fully process it. We might even create a slightly false memory of the thing because our brains are filling in the gaps. Then, if we look at the same thing again when we are fully paying attention, we might believe that we're perceiving it for the first time, but our brains are recalling a previous encounter with it. Therefore, it feels like these could be two totally separate events, but really they're on the same timeline, but it's just fragmented. When I read about this, it made a lot of sense to me. I could definitely imagine this being the case on certain occasions. Another possible explanation that's often floated surrounds the idea of déjà vu being being the symptom of a kind of brain glitch, or a kind of minor temporary processing error. Some experts think that when two functions of your brain that normally work alongside one another become out of sync, i.e. the memory recall process that then triggers you to access a memory, and therefore makes a situation feel familiar, that this can cause déjà vu. In this instance, the trigger of something feeling familiar can happen without the memory being recalled, and this gap that's left creates a sensation of déjà vu. Alternatively, it's also been suggested that the issue could lie in the brain misidentifying something that should be processed as a short-term memory, and instead processing it as a long-term one. So when it's recalled, it feels like you're accessing something from way back when it should feel much more recent. Again, I'm explaining all of these to the best of my ability. It's a really complicated topic, which is made all the more confusing by the fact that there is not one agreed upon definitive explanation for exactly what causes déjà vu. However, during the course of my research, I was fascinated to find out that there is a sizable list of triggers and potential reasons that some people may be more susceptible to experiencing déjà vu, and a number of them are quite compelling. Firstly, most sources tend to agree that young adults, aged between 15 and 25, are most likely to encounter the phenomenon. This is interesting as most memory-based issues are usually associated with people who are much older. But perhaps this leans into the idea that déjà vu could happen because the brain is extra active and on the ball. Research has also shown that déjà vu also looks to be most common in people with more extensive levels of education and those from wealthier socioeconomic backgrounds. The other note that often accompanies this is that people who travel more frequently and watch more films are also more likely to experience déjà vu. This is based on two key research papers, one by a group of psychologists from Japan, which was published in 2003, and the other by renowned déjà vu researcher unclear from 2008. And many have pointed out that it's likely that these factors are linked. For example, traveling abroad can be expensive and may be more accessible to those who have higher incomes, and therefore they might be exposed to a higher number of new situations, locations, and experiences that could trigger this false feeling of familiarity. Add in the movie angle and consider that some of these locations could have been viewed by the person via a film, and it's understandable why this likelihood of experiencing déjà vu could increase. Although this does make me wonder whether a study done today would produce different results, because the prevalence of social media means that we're all exposed to a lot more of the world via videos on certain apps on our phones. That's quite fascinating to think about. I'm definitely going to keep an eye out for any new research that comes out about this and see whether social media is mentioned at all. Anyway, it's also thought that people who often remember their dreams may also be more inclined to have episodes of the odd happening too. One other suggestion, proposed by Professor Alan S. Brown, is that those who hold more liberal beliefs may be more likely to encounter the phenomenon, but recognizes that this finding could be skewed by the fact that those who are more liberal may be more willing to discuss these experiences than people who are more conservative. Also, according to the Cleveland Clinic, instances of déjà vu are more likely to occur during evenings and at weekends, rather than during weekdays, which I thought was very interesting and makes me wonder whether this also means a person is more inclined to experience it during their leisure time rather than when they're at work, if we accept that more people tend to work in the weekdays versus the weekends and evenings, of course. That's just my own speculation, by the way, but if true, I wonder if there's something about a work environment that makes it less likely to happen. Especially because when it comes to the potential triggers for déjà vu, Professor Brown notes that things like tiredness and stress could be factors which make a person more likely to run into this odd sensation. And those are things I definitely associate with work rather than leisure. It's also widely believed that sights, sounds, and smells can be major triggers too, which makes sense. But one apparent trigger that caught the attention of several researchers almost a decade and a half ago was anxiety. And here we segue into the first of the two notable examples of déjà vu that I'm going to touch on today. Back in 2010, a then 23-year-old British man contacted his doctor after suffering from persistent déjà vu, which had become so continuous that it was beginning to traumatize him. Researchers from France, Canada, and the UK published a research paper on the man's case in 2014, and some of the findings were shocking. One passage from the paper read, "Anxiety and low mood led him to take a break from university, and he then began experiencing déjà vu. His recollection of these early episodes was that they would last for minutes, but could also be extremely prolonged. For example, while on holiday in a destination that he had previously visited, he reported feeling as though he had become trapped in a time loop. He reported finding these experiences very frightening. Later on in the paper, there were discussions about how his daily life was affected by the phenomenon, stating, quote, "His persistent déjà vu caused him to avoid watching television and listening to the radio, as well as reading papers and magazines, as he felt he had already encountered the content before." One of those who worked on the research paper, Dr. Chris Moulin, said that the man described these episodes as feeling like he was trapped in the psychological thriller film Donnie Darko. And honestly, that must have been so scary for him, so confusing and disorientating. Dr. Moulin told the BBC, quote, "There was one instance where he went to get a haircut. As he walked in, he got a feeling of déjà vu. Then he had déjà vu of the déjà vu. He couldn't think of anything else." The same article mentions how the man felt trapped in this time loop for 8 years. And the researchers noted that whilst anxiety may have been a trigger for the déjà vu, the anxiety is also a result of the never-ending occurrences of the phenomenon he experienced. So the worse it became, the worse he felt. And what was noted throughout the coverage of this case was that the man was generally healthy. And again, it was difficult for experts to fully understand what was happening to him. I truly can't imagine how distressing this must have been over the span of years. The poor man. He's anonymous, so we don't know how he's doing today, but I really hope things got better for him. I also wanted to tell you about one of the most famous historical cases of déjà vu, which was originally documented by François-Léon Arnoux, who was one of the first people to use the term déjà vu within a written scientific publication. In 1894, a French man who we know only as Louis admitted himself to a hospital for those with mental health conditions as he was suffering from a feeling of burnout. He was a former soldier, and although he described symptoms such as irritability and insomnia, he also revealed that he was experiencing déjà vu to an extreme level. He had encountered the phenomenon as a child, but it was now so prevalent that it was massively impacting his life. He was constantly agitated, and he had truly begun to believe that every event, from his own brother's wedding to his hospital admission, had happened to him before and was a staged reenactment, and a result of his family conspiring against him. This is a translation of what Arnoux wrote about Louis, which I think gives a significant insight into his condition. It's long, but it's important. Quote, "He recognized successively everything he saw. The yard, the lounge with the sofa and curtains, the gardens in all their detail. The people who welcomed him made the same gestures, said the same things, and he gave the same answers. He said that it was last year at a similar time that he came to the institute, and, like last year, he wanted to leave. When I first met him, here is exactly what happened. He responded to my greeting in an appropriate manner for someone who is with someone he does not know. Several words were exchanged and his physiognomy changed, and he said to me with a smile, "I recognize you now, Doctor. It was you who greeted me last year at exactly the same time in the same lounge. You asked me the same questions and I gave the same answers. Everything is very clear to me. You act surprised very well, but you can stop now." Despite my energetic disagreement, Louis maintained his conviction. At the time, Arnoux concluded that Louis's condition was simply a case of déjà vu that had spiraled out of control, and that the patient just couldn't snap himself out of it. But in more recent years, some experts have theorized that there could have been an additional health condition at play for Louis, such as a more serious memory disorder. But nonetheless, his case feels significant to consider when talking about the history of déjà vu, especially within the healthcare research field. Now, and I feel like I've just sat up straighter in my chair here because I know this is the part that many of you will have been waiting for. While scientists have presented their theories over the decades, those who like to look at phenomena like this from alternative angles have also come up with their own ideas too. One that's commonly referenced is that déjà vu is the result of a glitch in the Matrix. Quite literally, because within both the Matrix comics and in the films, the phenomenon is referenced repeatedly, and within this world, déjà vu occurs when the code of the Matrix has been altered, and an event which has just happened takes place again moments later. And I'm sure at this point, most fans of the Matrix are thinking about the black cat that walks past Neo, and perhaps from this, or at least inspired by this link between déjà vu and the idea that we are living in some kind of simulation has become kind of a pop culture reference. Of course, there will be people out there who believe it on a deeper level, but in my opinion, a lot of the time it's said as more of a throwaway remark. You know, "Ooh, that's so weird, I've just had a huge déjà vu moment, it felt like a glitch in the Matrix." As you all know, I'm not big on conspiracy theories, so I'm going to leave this one at that. But it's definitely interesting to see how this theory has become more mainstream, even if it's not always taken particularly seriously. But one alternative idea that seems to have gripped some people really quite sincerely is that moments of déjà vu are in fact recalling real memories. It's just that they're memories we experienced in a past life, which pop up for us again as we're living in our current incarnation. And you know what? This is interesting, as the more I'm thinking about it, the more I'm realizing that this is the theory that my mind often goes to when I experience déjà vu. I have definitely made the comment in the past when I have had that strange sense of familiarity wash over me. I've said, "Oh gosh, I must have been here before in a past life." And it's weird because even though I'm not religious, I guess I am spiritual to a certain extent. I mean, I believe in ghosts, I've had paranormal experiences, so there's something there on that front. But do I truly believe that déjà vu is connected to our potential past lives? I'm massively conflicted, and I'll talk more about this in my conclusion, because a lot of the scientific theories do make sense to me, but then again, none of them have been proven beyond all doubt, so maybe there is something in it. And it seems that I'm not necessarily alone in feeling like I'm in two minds about this, if you'll excuse the pun. Remember Professor Alan Brown, who I mentioned earlier? Well, in 2003, he actually put together a huge academic review of everything that scientists and researchers had written about déjà vu up until that point in time. And whilst there were, of course, formal scientific studies that he explored, it's also worth noting that a good percentage of what he found had some kind of nod to the paranormal or supernatural, whether it was the past lives theory, or was more to do with the idea that déjà vu is some kind of psychic event that happens to us when we're receiving a message from a higher power or seeing through some kind of veil. The fact that these more spooky theories have also been so extensively written about is noteworthy. Then there's the multiverse theory, theory, the idea that alternate universes exist simultaneously with ours, and that these moments of déjà vu are actually momentary slips between universes, or the different timelines interacting somehow. This is obviously a huge and very involved topic in and of itself. I'm not going to pretend to fully understand it, I'm certainly not a physicist, but the basic premise of it is certainly interesting. It also makes me think back to the episode of the podcast where I talked about time slips, and I start to wonder whether that could form the basis of a further theory. Could those fleeting seconds in which someone has the sensation of déjà vu actually be connected to a mini time slip? The questions just keep stacking up when it comes to this topic, and that's very much where I land when it comes to my own thoughts. It's just question upon unanswered question. I had thought that by the time I got to the end of my research, I might have had somewhat of a clearer view of this topic in my mind, but it's not quite the case. I will say that I find the concept that the brain is fact-checking itself very compelling. That does make sense to me and fits with the idea that the more of the world people are exposed to, the more frequently they might encounter the phenomenon. It's almost as though the mind has so much to process and organize that there might be these memory blips on occasion. So I could see this being true, but my eternal fascination with the supernatural is weighing on me on this occasion, and it's that past life idea that I can't quite get out of my head. I definitely think that there are instances of déjà vu that could be more easily explained, perhaps by the split perception theory when a person hasn't been paying full attention to a situation. But I know that I've personally had moments when this phenomenon has happened to me, where there just doesn't appear to be any rational reasoning that I can draw upon as to why, and you just get that instinctive sense that something weird has just taken place. The thing is that we just simply don't know anything for sure, and that will always result in ideas from both ends of the spectrum sounding worthy of consideration, at least to me. But something I do know is that, without a doubt, the next time I sense that strangely familiar feeling coming over me, it will now be something I try to analyse on a much deeper level than ever before. Well, I think you all know what I'm going to say next. I cannot wait to find out which of the theories I've discussed today sounds most intriguing to you. Have you ever had a bout of déjà vu that has really stuck with you? Equally, are you someone who has never experienced it? That is something I would be so interested to know. I always find your views and comments on topics like this one extra enthralling, because everyone has such different reactions and outlooks and lived experiences. So do be sure to pop me a note and share your feedback on this subject. The details on how to do so will be coming up very soon, right after our regularly scheduled outro feature. It's time now for Weird Media. If you are a complete history geek like I am, you may just love today's Weird Media recommendation, particularly if 1, you're interested in Tudor history, and 2, you can be a bit nosy. You enjoy a bit of inside information. You like to dig deeper than just surface level. Again, just like me. This shout out is for The Private Lives of the Tudors book by Tracy Borman. It's something I read a few years ago and I've kept it on my bookshelf because I just found it so interesting. Naturally, there's a good amount about Henry VIII in there, but there was also so much about Elizabeth I and Mary, which I find more fascinating personally, and also chapters dedicated to Henry VII and Edward VI too, so it wasn't a total Henry VIII fest. Unsurprisingly, given the title, the book focuses on the daily routines, relationships, and personal habits of the Tudors. It dives into their favourite foods, their morning and evening rituals, their clothing, but it also looks at things like their insecurities and the behaviours that resulted from these. And for those who grew up reading the Horrible Histories books like I did, there are a number of the more grim and gross details in there too, especially when it comes to the personal hygiene side of things. I know that won't be something everyone finds interesting to read about, but possibly because I'm a bit of a germaphobe, I've always found this subject kind of irresistible, which I know is weird to say. It was probably this that drew me in initially, to be honest. On the back of the book, there's literally a sentence that says, "How did Elizabeth I clean her teeth?" And it's a question I simply had to know the answer to. In terms of the book itself, I found it to be written in a very accessible way. I've read many a dry, stuffy, academic history book in my life, and this was definitely geared more towards the general reader. A little bit of a peep show reference there for any fellow fans. But yes, it's definitely a book I'd recommend to anyone who's interested in Tudor history. And in fact, as soon as I pulled it off my bookshelf, I decided I was going to reread it myself. So do let me know if you end up doing the same. I always love to chat further about my weird media recommendations with you all. Okay, it's sore shout out time now, and I have so many, so I'll try to rattle through them quickly. There was a BBC Science Focus piece by Thomas Ling from May 2023, and another first published on Mosaic from May of 2017. There was a great piece published on the Cleveland Clinic website from October 2022 that was super helpful, and an article on thecut.com by Carrie Rom from June of 2016. There was a CNN article by Sandy Lamotte that was published in January of 2016, and a piece on Healthline written by Crystal Raypole and reviewed by Dr. Deborah Rose Wilson from March 2020. Anne Cleary wrote a brilliant Science Alert article that was from October 2022, and the Britannica page about Déjà Vu was great. That was written by Jennifer Murtoff. We had another BBC article by Emma Ailes from January 2015, and the matrix.fandom.com website was very helpful for that section. Finally, there were of course the research papers I mentioned throughout. And what I'm actually going to do here is try and find links to all of them and then pop them in the show notes, because there are so many names to read out for some of them. But those will be the same papers I mentioned a few times in this episode. To finish off with, here's a quick rundown of all the ways you can get in touch. On Instagram and Threads, just look up @ThingsGetWeirdPodcast. On TikTok, we are Things Are About to Get Weird. And on Facebook, you can find us by searching for the podcast name. Our private discussion group on there is amazing. It's such a great place to have a proper chat about our stories. Our email address is thingsgetweirdpodcast@gmail.com. And if you've enjoyed this episode, a super quick rating or review wherever you're listening today would be amazing. I can't tell you how much it helps the show. A big and sincere thank you for listening today, and I'll chat to you all again next week in Weird Fix. So until next time, take care of yourself and others and keep it weird, but the good kind of weird.